And we're recording.
Awesome.
Sick. Okay, so, hey everyone. It's time for another episode of We Don't Have a Name for This. We don't need a name.
Welcome to
The joke.
Pack Jones and Ass.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man, it still makes me happy every time.
Where you go to not get over in real estate.
Oh, man. Okay, topics today. Number 1, earnest money and timelines. Number 2, what do we do day to day as real estate agents? Number 3, election stuff. And number 4, holiday listing / buying. So, holiday meaning the holidays, not holiday Utah. Number 1, earnest money and timelines. So, fun. It's a story time. In 10 years of doing this, I've rarely ever had buyers back out and lose their earnest money. I've had it happen twice this year on listings of mine, which is kind of crazy. One of them was earlier in the summer. The buyers on a house were buying it for their son who is going to be going to college. And they just decided like, oh, well, we're not sure we're comfortable with the terms of this loan where we're buying it as owner occupied. And so since our son would be there, so the son went and signed a lease. And they walked away like 2 days before settlement, lost $10,000 in earnest money. And then just recently, which is crazy to me, that they're just like, okay, I guess our son signed a lease. We'll walk away from $10,000.
That's nuts. But also, what that tells me is that people who are in a position to buy long-term investments like real estate, where it's a tough market to get into, are less concerned with short-term loss than they are with long-term terms.
That's a good takeaway, Joel.
Thank you.
You're so insightful. The second one was actually just here recently. Some buyers went under contract on a land listing of mine out in Mapleton, made sure that they were unrepresented because I personally don't love doing dual agency, meaning I'm representing both the buyer and the seller. What that basically means is when we do that, we just become Switzerland. We have to be totally neutral, can't give anybody any advantage over anybody else. I like working specifically for my clients.
Not a lot of checks and balances there.
Exactly.
Seems like it kind of disadvantages both sides a little bit.
Yeah, so you still have the fiduciary duties of like honesty and disclosure and everything to everybody, but you have to be very neutral. I like working for my clients specifically. So these buyers went unrepresented. I had them sign all of the disclosures. When you go unrepresented, we have you sign disclosures saying, hey, I recognize the agent is working specifically for the other party, yada, yada, yada. I told them to read all the contracts very closely. And it's a young couple. They just kind of flaked out, and they're like, "Oh, we found another lot, down the street for $20,000 less. So we're going to cancel this and go for that." And I said, "Okay, but if you cancel this, your due diligence deadline that you chose, I didn't choose this for you, that you chose was 3 days ago. So you're going to lose $3,000 in earnest money." Mm-hmm. And they said, "Okay." And now they've been harassing my seller, saying, "Well, can we have our money back? It would be really nice if you gave our money back." In the meantime, my seller's plans had to change because this lot isn't selling, and I had to talk with the buyer's mom who was calling and harassing my seller. Like, it's absurd. So, long story short there, earnest money means something. Timelines mean even more.
Yeah, and I think different people sometimes have a different idea of how much leverage is worth. That's the whole point of having earnest money. I've had to be a bulldog for my seller clients before, where
Including recently.
yes, yeah, where, hey, you said this was non-refundable. That's what it is, and we chose your offer instead of somebody else's. And now, if you go crawling back to another offer or something like that, you don't have leverage with that buyer anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, the earnest money can be a big thing. And actually, so my last 2 listings have gotten multiple offers. And the weakest offer by far not only had weak terms, it was kind of funny. I can't mention names, but agent was very nice, but she mentioned that they had missed out, or one of her last clients had missed out on 14 multiple offer situations in a row and lost all of them. And when we got the offer, it kind of made sense to me because we got the offer. House had been on the market for 2 days. Offer came in for $15,000, I think, $10,000 or $15,000 under list price on a house that I told her we had multiple people saying they were going to make offers, and they were offering $500 in earnest money. So
basically nothing.
Yeah, on a $525,000 listing, meaning these buyers could get to the day before closing, back out, and only lose their $500 in earnest money.
Yeah. So while earnest money is I'm currently buying a new car. Or a new used car, and there's a to take it off the lot, there's a non-refundable deposit on it, and it's like it's a couple $1,000s, but it's just like that's a huge. If it's non-refundable, cool. In home purchasing, your earnest money is typically refundable up to a certain point, and so a lot of people treat it as if it doesn't matter. But that's where that's where your leverage is.
Yeah. As evidenced by my 2 deals this year. Like, if you back out, there's going to be a penalty because you didn't do it within your allotted timelines. Yeah. And in Utah, the contract is super weighted towards protecting buyers' interests. Yeah. Like, I've never, in 10 years, never once lost a buyer's earnest money. So, because we pay close attention to timelines, we make sure, like, if you're hesitant about this at all, we need to be on top of it.
Samesies.
Yeah.
Our whole team never lost earnest money for a buyer.
$0 lost.
Yeah.
Which is exciting. So that's just going to say, like, when you're writing a contract, pay close attention to the terms in that contract. And this is not just real estate. This is everything. I feel bad because it was a young couple on the land that, like, lost their earnest money. They probably could have used that, but they weren't so young that they shouldn't know that you need to read contracts and know that timelines matter.
And they chose to be unrepresented.
Yeah, exactly. And I had them sign the disclosures. The mom called me, and she was very Utah nice. She's like, "Oh my gosh, like, we just really appreciate it." And but you didn't tell my son and his wife about these timelines.
I was
like, well, first of all, it wasn't my job to, but second of all, let me read you the texts that I sent them, because I do everything in writing to make sure that I'm covered. Let me send you read you the text that I sent them, where I explicitly said, a due diligence timeline in a typical contract is 2 to 3, like 10 to 14 days, after which, in this case, because you're paying cash, your earnest money would become non-refundable. So I read like 5 different texts to her verbatim saying, nope, I told your daughter everything I could without working against my seller, and she was very well informed. She just didn't pay attention.
I think as the real estate climate is changing because of different lawsuits and everything that's going on, and I think that buyers agents, real estate agents for buyers are coming under fire a bit, and so everybody expects that we're going to see disruptors or people via apps or whatever it is, and more unrepresented buyers. I think where this is going to have the biggest impact is in buyers' understanding of earnest money, because it's not nothing. As far as typical what you can expect to put down as earnest money, it's going to be in Utah anywhere between on average $4,000 and $10,000. It can be a lot more than that, but
we usually recommend 1% ish.
Yeah, so we're seeing pretty much between $4,000 and $10,000. Now, yes, refundable. This is so nuanced, and I think that's where the value of a buyer's agent comes in, is really explaining and clarifying on a day-to-day basis or a week-to-week basis what the different clauses in the contracts and what's going on with that particular deal, how that affects your earnest money, and at what point it becomes non-refundable. And if you go, we're gonna save a few $1,000s by not using a buyer's agent, you could do 3 or 4 deals where you lose $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 or $6,000 each, and you're $20,000 in the hole all of a sudden because you decided you wanted to save a few $1,000s by being an unrepresented buyer.
Yeah.
Say these things in the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
I was going to say the other thing about earnest money is that, it benefits the seller because the buyer is saying, we got some skin in the game here.
We're in it to win it.
But also, the amount that you choose for your earnest money, right, is going to protect the buyer as well. If the seller were to back out, they would need to refund your earnest money plus whatever you gave them. They would give the same amount back to you, correct?
Yep, exactly.
And so, it's a win-win. So if it's a house that you love, maybe don't put down $1,000 or $2,000 earnest money. If it's a $500,000 home, put down $20,000 in earnest money.
That's a strong negotiating tactic. If you want your offer to stick out versus somebody else, you can do that. You can even elect to say, hey, half of this earnest money will go non-refundable after our due diligence deadline, and the other half will go non-refundable after financing and appraisal.
Right.
So the difference there can be like a week or 2 weeks, where if something goes crazy, at least the sellers have that reassurance that if something falls apart, they'll get some compensation for their time off the market.
Yep.
And it sounds like what you're saying, you can write the contract so that certain parts of it are non-refundable at different times.
Oh,
yes.
Oh, yeah.
So just whatever makes you happy.
Yeah, and there's a lot of strategy going into this. Which leads me into our next topic. Let's talk about, we're going to skip around a little
Great.
bit, but listing and buying a house during the holidays. What should people know?
Well, I mean, rates are, even though the Fed keeps cutting rates, the mortgage rates have been going up the last couple of months. We still expect to see some rate cuts next year, but we can't promise any of that stuff. Nobody knows, but buyers are waiting. And it's a naturally slow time of the year as it is going into the holidays. So you've got buyers waiting for rates to go down and sellers not sure whether they should sell now or wait. You probably get closer to top dollar selling if you can afford to wait till spring.
Yeah.
If you're looking to buy a home, man, you've got leverage now like you're not going to have next year. You're not going to get a cheap house. You're not going to get a good deal on real estate. Real estate is the most solid investment you can make as a person who's going to live in your long-term investment. You're not going to get a steal on anything. But as far as leverage goes, you've got actual leverage right now that you're not going to have this time next year.
Because there's more buyers on the market.
There's less buyers in the market now, but there will be more buyers next year.
So for context, right now, as of, October 30th, rates have moved up like between a half and a full percent since that 0.5% Fed rate cut.
Yeah.
Now, reasons for that, and we'll talk about that in a little bit too, but we've got an election coming up. Mm-hmm. There's a potential World War III happening with Russia, and in the Middle East, things are getting crazy, and that makes the markets really uncomfortable. And so they're fleeing to more stable things like bonds. So that's
it's temporarily, it's a really uncomfortable time to purchase a home. So if you are a buyer looking to get into it, it's temporarily uncomfortable, and you can leverage that to your advantage.
Yep. Now, this is going to sound like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, but as a seller, there actually can be some benefits to listing towards the holidays, too. Mm. If you don't want to just have every looky-loo coming through your house, the buyers that are out buying right now are the ones that are serious.
They need to get into something.
Yeah, they want to get into something. So you're not going to have to deal with as much just like BS traffic. A lot of people will hold off on listing during the holidays, so you may not have quite as much competition as you would have in like April, which is the hottest listing month.
I'm going to share this with my seller clients.
Yeah, there you go. So there are benefits, costs and benefits either way. But business still happens between the holidays. It does just tend to slow down a little bit. So be aware of that. And yeah, buyers, you may have a chance to get a little bit more in concessions right now than you would in April when there are going to be a bunch of other buyers. Now, let's use that to swing into elections. Jordan and I were talking about this in the office yesterday. We're not going to get too political here, but long and short of it is some people think one party is better for housing. Some people think the other party is better for housing. I'm seeing potential pitfalls with both parties right now. If Trump gets elected and enacts all these tariffs that he's talking about, almost all of the economists I'm hearing talk about this are saying that will almost definitely have an inflationary effect. Meaning, that could mean that mortgage rates come down a little bit if the Fed has to use those to leverage and fight the inflationary effects a little bit. But if rates come down, home prices go up. The other potential downside here is if that inflationary effect is bad enough, it could end up in a recession that we've kind of been skipping along,
Barely.
like recession adjacent. If that happens and a lot of people lose their jobs, that could have a negative effect on housing. That's about the only way we see housing prices going down is massive job losses. Utah is pretty well insulated against that because we have the most diverse economy in the country, meaning it's not all in tourism like Las Vegas. It's not all in manufacturing like some of the Midwest places. We're really diverse, the most diverse in the country. So even when like massive economic things happen, they tend to not hit Utah anywhere near as hard.
It seems I feel like I've been that our highs don't get as high and our lows don't get as low.
Yeah.
When things go nuts, they don't go as nuts here as they do in Austin. But when things tank like they do in other places of the country, they don't tank here like they do there.
Exactly. Now, the other side of the election coin, Kamala Harris is talking about doing a $25,000 first-time home buyer credit and she's talked about building 3 million new units. That would actually be huge. The Trump talk about opening up federal lands for building new housing in some places could be useful. Like I know in Nevada, they have a problem with not having enough land available, and a lot of that is federal land. Wouldn't really affect us that much in Utah. I don't think we're at a shortage of land because of federal lands. We're just
sorry, Texas, if you have any desire for that.
Yeah, right.
No luck there.
The one that worries me a little bit is the $25,000 first-time home buyer credit. If that happens,
our prices are going to go through the roof.
Yeah, because that would bring in like probably hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of new buyers. That first-time home buyers specifically, one of the biggest hurdles is saving up for a down payment, and it is a big thing. Like a 3.5%, 3% down payment. Most lenders have a 3% down payment first-time home buyer program, but 3% of a $500,000 house is $15,000. Plus, you have to pay closing costs, which you're probably going to be out of pocket unless you get seller-paid closing costs. Probably out of pocket in the like $20,000 plus range.
With the $25,000 credit, though, I think it's going to flip things where we're not going to see sellers paying for seller-paid closing costs like we are right now.
Yeah, well, and there are so many people that can't save up that much money, or just
I can't.
It's hard. Yeah, that's a lot of money to save quickly.
Yeah, that's a big thing with buyers is that don't own a home right now, and they're waiting, and they're like, well, we don't have enough of a down payment, or we're waiting for rates to come down. And I'm going, like, as somebody who, with the same sentiment the first time I bought a house, like, your home equity is going to make you more money 10 times faster than you can save it away. Like, I can't save money at the rate my house is going to make it for me. And the other people say, a lot of people say, Utah housing conservatively,
historically, it's been 5%.
5% per annually. It's like 5%. That's not a very good return rate. You're not paying $500,000 cash for your house and getting a 5% return on that. You're putting down $25,000 and getting a 5% return on $500,000.
Another $25,000.
Yeah, that's different. That's apples and oranges. That's a different game we're talking about. And for me personally, that's the only way I've been able to make any financial moves in my life as a normal human being who did not go to college, who does not work a crazy tech job and make a bunch of money, who does not come from a wealthy family.
Yeah.
You know, home ownership has been the only way I've been able to make any financial moves in my life.
If you look at the national statistics, the vast majority of people's net worth is wrapped up in their home equity. And that's just how it is. That's how it is for, I mean, I know the majority of my net worth is home equity.
I think it's 3 for 3 here.
Yeah.
On that.
I'm not going to knock the stock market. I'm not knowledgeable enough to play the stock market. I'm not knowledgeable enough to like play VC and invest in my buddy's company or whatever. Like, I'm going to live in my house. I'm going to pay I'm going to pay rent, or I'm going to pay a mortgage, or whatever it is. And it's so uncomfortable that first year, and you make concessions as far as your lifestyle, and you go, okay, we're going to make salad and steaks from buying our food wherever, and we're not going out to eat for a minute. And then you get used to it, and then you start talking to your friends a year or two later, and you find out what they're paying on rent, and you're going, I'm glad I bought a house.
Yeah. So, long story short, I see potential pitfalls. Whoever wins the election, hopefully it turns out well. Hopefully whoever does win does actually work on some legislation that leads to more housing, because that's the only way housing is going to get more affordable, is a massive influx of product.
Maybe if you're waiting on that $25,000 stimulus, maybe you get all your ducks in a row right now, so that when that goes into effect, you can be first in line and beat the crowd.
Yeah,
maybe that's what you do.
Man, an influx. We're so short on inventory still. Even though inventory has moved up, we're still way short. An influx of hundreds of thousands or millions of buyers would just be a nightmare.
You're going to look at non-refundable.
It's going to be 21 and 22
money,
again.
Yeah, non-refundable earnest money on day one, and putting buyers in an uncomfortable situation. I don't know, man.
Yeah, I'm not psyched about that, but I guess if it helps people get in, it would have to be in conjunction with a massive increase in inventory.
Boom.
Okay, and lastly, what do we do day to day as real estate agents? This is a funny one because real estate is an interesting job. We have no actual direction Nobody is telling us what to do on any given day at any given time. And it's the reason that like 75% of people don't renew their license after the first year, and 85% are out within the first 2 or 5 years. I can't remember the exact stat, but it's a hard job to make a job, if that makes sense.
It does.
It requires a lot of self-direction. It requires a lot of and your schedule is never the same. So like we try to time block as much as we can, but without fail, I'll get a call from a client right in the middle of when I'm supposed to be doing paperwork. And then we end up on a half-hour call talking about the benefits of different neighborhoods.
So it's basically the same as being a recording engineer.
Yeah, pretty much.
30-minute call on why your song is so creative.
Yep, exactly. So day to day, it's all over the place, but a large part of, we were talking about this yesterday, a large part of what I like about this job is it makes me a better friend. We do spend a decent amount of our time just like reaching out to people. We try really hard not to be MLM people like, hey, how are you doing? By the way, do you know someone that wants to buy a house? Yeah. Because those are the worst people. They drive me nuts. But keeping in touch with people, following up with deals, doing our due diligence. We do a lot of research on deals. It's not uncommon if we're not sure about zoning on a house, if somebody wants to use it for like a short-term rental or something. Most places don't allow that. So wouldn't you know it, we're on the phone with the city and looking at zoning maps, making sure that it can be used for what they want it to be used for. It's a very diverse job, which works out well for my ADD, because if I had a desk job, I would probably die instantly.
Yeah. If I had to wrap it up, what I do, and there's a million different ways to do real estate, and if I had to kind of sum up how I look at it, is consistently making my friends and family and people that are in my network or whatever aware of and educated of all of the best case and worst case scenarios, and helping them execute on those, on their decisions based on those. Hey, this is what the market is doing. This is potentially a really good move for you here. Worst case scenario, this is what's going to happen. Best case scenario, this is what's going to happen. Hey, you've got a question about this thing going on here. Best case scenario here, worst case scenario here. If it were me, I'd do this. Your move. And how can I help execute on that move?
So going back to the daily thing, a lot of the time I spend on any given day is doing research so that I can speak in an informed way to my clients. Right. That's why we do these videos. We want to keep people informed. We want to make sure people know what's going on. We don't get millions of views on these videos, but if they're helpful for 2 people, I'm in. Right. And so, like just yesterday, I think I sent you like 4 different podcasts and email newsletters that you can follow, because that kind of having that knowledge is the difference between. It can be the difference between a good agent and a not good agent.
Well, you don't want to learn the hard way after the fact on something as big as a home purchase.
Yeah.
You can do that. Buying a guitar, like, oh, this one, I really like the color, I really whatever. And it's like you get a little bit of buyer's remorse, but you spent $500 on it, so you decide to tell yourself you liked it or whatever. You don't want to do that on a home purchase.
No.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we try to Will here. We'll throw Will a shout out here. Sharpen the saw. Spend a lot of our time just making sure we know our contracts well, because the base contract is 6 pages, but there are dozens and dozens of addenda you can use. There are a ton of different ways you can write addenda. There are so many things, so many little intricacies to know in this job that you don't learn in the 120-hour licensure class. It's stuff you have to learn by doing it and by talking with other people. So we're constantly talking with each other, running scenarios. You ran a scenario by me this morning.
That's right.
Yeah. So that's kind of what we do with our day to day. It's rarely the same. We probably could be more regimented, but almost all of that time is spent trying to better ourselves so that we can better serve our clients.
Yeah. It's good.
I was going to say, you've been in this for a while. You've been doing real estate for
10
years.
September.
Joel, you've been in it 4
and some change.
Yeah.
4 and 3/4.
4 and 3/4 years. I'm pretty new. Been in it less than a year. I feel like when I was in the coaching session yesterday, they were talking about getting to know the contracts, like getting to know them really well. Like, what does that look like for a new agent like me? Do I just like in the evening sit down and just read
Yep.
open my book of contracts and just try to memorize as much as I can and go over it again? Is that what you guys
honestly,
did? Or?
I think it's so we have a background in recording and production, and when I had a question about recording or production, I have and continue to have a network of people that I can call and ask about hey, I'm trying to do this. What's the easiest way to do this? And shortcut myself through a bunch of steps. That to me, that's what's up. If you're in the middle of a high stakes situation and you've got a deadline coming up at 5:00 p.m. today or 5:00 p.m. tomorrow, and there are 5 different ways of handling that situation, and you want to wrap your head around what the best possible way is based on the knowledge of the contracts and the nuances of what the market is doing, you have yourself a network of knowledgeable people around you and a safety net of, hey, this is kind of what I'm thinking. What do you think about this? I hit DJ up all the time. We just being able to run it by each other. Whereas, man, so many. I'm not gonna
don't name names.
Talk crap, but just working with people, it's understandably so much easier as a human to act like you know what you're talking about and mask the fact that you're insecure about your lack of knowledge, than to ask a question and move forward confidently yet cautiously. Yet the agents on the other side that I'm working with, so often it's so obvious that that they're moving forward out of a lack of knowledge.
Seeing the way some contracts are written is honestly terrifying. If I found out that like my parents in another state were working with an agent that was writing contracts in these ways that leave your clients open to some serious potential liability, I would be furious. So it's important that you know what you're doing and that you're willing to ask.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, that's where I feel like a lot of real estate professionals are salespeople first and knowledgeable advisors second, third, or fourth.
Yeah.
The boat I'm in right now is I've got so much experience doing the recording thing, being in a studio. I feel like an expert. Like people ask me a question here in the studio, and I feel like it's like I'm the king. Like I get it all. I know.
Yep.
And the real estate world is not the same for me. But
when it's appropriate to ask a question.
Yep. And
for sure. And you guys know
you joined a team.
I joined a great team.
There's a reason teams
with some
are a good
experience,
idea.
guys.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and it's funny. Like I've been doing it for 10 plus years. I'm a broker. Like I know the stuff pretty well. But every once in a while, I'll still I almost always know the answer, but I will bounce it off other people to make sure that I'm not missing, that I don't have any blind spots.
Right.
Because collaboration is important because we want to make sure we're taking care of our clients as well as humanly possible.
So what I'm hearing is I should definitely be reading these contracts on a fairly frequent basis just to keep them familiarized and keep understanding what I'm learning.
Yep. And there's so many addenda.
And then just clarify with you guys when I'm actually in the actual situation.
Oh yes. Yeah. I remember when I first got licensed, I was like, I wish there was a 2-page real estate for dummies that would, even though we went through all of our hours of licensure and everything like that.
They're so useless.
Yeah, but for both home buyers and sellers and for agents, as far as like, what does going under contract mean?
Totally.
Do you know what I mean?
What is settlement?
What is earnest money?
What is escrow? What's the difference between in escrow and under contract? And why, when I talk to a title person, do they use this term? I think that means the same thing as this other thing, but I'm not sure. Just all of that stuff where it's like, okay, A, B, C, D, like
it's still how my brain feels all the time.
If everything went perfectly well and easy, what would that look like? And I feel like most buyers and sellers don't I think that's part of our job is to clarify that for buyers and sellers.
100%. And soft pitch. That's why it's good to work with us, because you're not working with one person. You're working with 3 people who are part of a larger network of hundreds of people.
Also, why it's good to work with reputable loan officers and title companies.
1,000,000%. Yep. Make sure your people know their stuff. We're running out of time, so let's wrap it up. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Don't get fucked over by real estate.